welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. Really excited to have our guest on today, Valerie Collins. We actually didn't even talk about what brokerage you were with. I know we had talked a while back and you said maybe you were going to be starting a team or something like that, but who are you currently with?
Yeah, I work with Remax Executive as my broker. Um, I'm out of the Modesto office, but they're in Manteca, Ripon, and Turlock as well in the Central Valley.
I've always been interested about your guys' brokerage because our brokerage is in Midtown Sacramento, and there's a
Mhm.
Remax Gold next to us. And I never really understood why there's like these indicators. Do you know why there's like the gold and you're in a different one? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, it's just like franchises. There's a Remax umbrella, and
Hmm.
then franchises pop up under this Remax umbrella.
Is
So
is gold
not
the best?
related.
Is there a
Yeah,
platinum or diamond?
no, I don't know why they choose. I guess it makes it sound fancy, but Remax Executive is obviously the best.
All right. No, I always thought like when I would walk by, they'd be like Remax Gold. That's got like a
Oh,
cool
gold.
like sounding
I
name to it.
know.
It does sound high end, right? It sounds
Yeah.
like they're dealing in with all the high listings or
Uh-huh.
whatever. So we like to get started with the podcast with just kind of getting your background. Let people know who you are. I don't actually even know when you got into real estate, so you might have got into it really young. Maybe you did something before that. So if you could just kind of let us know, how did you get into real estate? What were you doing before real estate?
Yeah, I've been in real estate for about 5 years now. I did not start as a sales. I didn't start as a realtor. I had a degree in creative writing and English, and I had just had a kid, so I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not quite sure what this is going to look like. There was a team in Manteca that needed a copywriter, designer,
Hmm.
just kind of like a anything and everything. Everything kind of falls on this desk. I said, I'll do it, I guess. So I started in doing graphic design, doing copywriting, doing anything with their marketing.
Hmm.
And then it just kind of grew to photography, videography, and just kind of started to expand their marketing base, which was awesome for me. I learned a lot, but I didn't make a lot of money. And, I hit life circumstances where I was like, I need to make more money than
Yeah.
this. I looked at all these sales agents working around me and I thought, I can do that. I can do better than that.
Hmm.
So one day I said, you know what, I'm gonna get my license. And I was actually told, like, I don't know, like, you're really chill. And I don't know if you know many realtors, but they're kind of bossy.
Hmm.
And so I was told pretty consistently, like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I got this. And so I dived in and it's been great. I haven't looked back. It's been wonderful.
That's funny. We haven't like had a full on conversation in probably the better part of 16 years, I would
Yeah.
imagine. But
It's been a long
I don't know if I would have ever described you as like chill. Like I always thought that you were kind of like outgoing and vibrant.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting take. I don't know, maybe age has matured you a little bit. But so it's funny actually. That's the same way that I got into real estate.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
my background, I had got my degree in communication. I got my master's in media and public relations, and I had a business that I was running most of our marketing and stuff. And I had been doing design since I was 18. And I kind of worked my way in with the brokers that I'm with now because they wanted to bring marketing in house. And so it's interesting. You're actually the only other person that I've
Yeah.
heard like that's how you got started. I'm sure there's other people because there's a lot, and I've talked about this. There's a lot of brokerages and a lot of real estate agents who have a very difficult time understanding how to brand themselves correctly
Yeah.
and how to even take photos correctly and things like
Yep.
that. And so I always thought that that was a really unique way to get in. And look, I found someone else that's done it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
did
They
you
seem
find
to
it?
go,
Did you find
huh?
it like listed or somebody said, hey, you should check this out?
Like the job, the
Yeah.
original job. Yeah, it was actually a friend of a friend, and she had said, "Oh, I don't know, she's got a weird take on stuff. Like, maybe we should talk to her." And I said, "Yeah, sure. Like, I'll do it." I wasn't doing anything else. I was trying to figure out kind of where my path led. I was like, "Yeah, let's try it and see." And that's all she wrote, man. It
Yeah.
was it was a good step.
Well, that's a degree in writing, right, or whatever, and it's kind of on the same path. A degree in communication can take you in so
Yeah.
many directions in businesses. I think a lot of people and all those communication majors out there feel this pain where it's like, oh, it's an easy major or it's a worthless
Yeah.
major, right? But a lot of people don't understand that within any capable business that
Yeah.
these are things that they're often struggling with and they need some sort of professional in there to help them with that. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like you kind of found that niche and you could have pretty much gone into anything.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you decided on real estate. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it does. It feels a little bit like I fell into it, but at the same time, it works really well with my personality. It works really well with my lifestyle. It was one of those things I thought about continuing on in school, and I got a lot of the people in my life at the time were like, keep going, like I thought teaching would be great for me. Teaching at a college level, like that was kind of maybe I should head in that direction. I think I'd be good at it. But that was a long path and a broke path.
Right.
And I was
Yeah.
like, that's long, man. Is that really what I want? Is that really what I want my life to be when I can do what I love and make a lot of money and learn a new skill, all kind of in one. So it worked out well for me.
That's funny. We're living a very similar life path
I know.
because
I thought that
when I
too.
was
When
in
I was
grad,
first,
yeah,
yeah.
when I was in grad school, I was a student assistant. So I taught public speaking for a year. And I
Mhm.
thought, wow, this is really fun. Like, I really enjoy this. And I actually had filled out my application. I got all my recommendations to go get my PhD. And I kind of had this incident with my professors where I was just kind of like the bureaucracy of
Yeah.
academia. I was just like, maybe this isn't right for me, right? I'm like, I just like teaching. I don't want to play the politics. And so, but that's funny. We were kind of, I wonder if that was like around similar times. We were both like, I
Yeah.
wonder if we should get into teaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's crazy. I've seen
yeah.
a lot, like some of the things you've said, some of the things you posted, I'm like, oh, I feel that, man. I feel that. It's funny how our paths have been pretty parallel,
Yeah.
but
So,
it's crazy.
So you got into real estate. You said it's been about 5 years.
Mhm.
What was the process like for you? Briefly, kind of, did you think the exam and studying and stuff like that was difficult? I like to ask kind of like every guest that we have because I think for people that are interested in getting into real estate, or there's always this kind of like big divergence in this, or some people are like, no, it's super easy. It's one of the
Right.
easiest tests you'll take. And then there's other people like me. I thought it was a pretty difficult test.
Mhm.
I studied really aggressive for it, which I mean, that's how I normally study. But what was your experience with that?
Yeah. So at that point, I was on a team of about 10 people. Yeah, I think there was like 6 or 7 agents and
Mm,
there's about 10 people, and everybody I was knew I was going in for the test. And so I felt a lot of pressure
hmm.
to not want to fail. I
Right.
mean, I wanted to pass. And I'm an overstudier as well. I like if I go to play, I play hard. So I felt good about going in, but I studied my ass off. I studied a lot.
Hmm.
So I felt pretty confident. Now, when I walked out of the test, so when you walk out of the test, they give you like a paper, right? Like they don't tell you, oh, you passed or failed. They give
Yeah,
you a
it's very
paper.
secret agent. I don't understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to read it outside. So like I walked outside, I was like, oh God, I failed. I failed. I know I failed. But like I just did not feel confident when I walked out. And I looked at it and they're like, it's an error. You'll find out in 2 to 4 weeks.
Oh,
But I failed.
wow.
Yeah,
I've
I
never heard of
flipped.
that.
Yeah, and I know you're not supposed to do this. Like they say, oh, don't, but I walked right back in and I
Yeah.
was like, somebody explain this to me. And they're like, oh, there was an error grading your test. I was like, are you kidding me? So I'm driving back with my friend, which is now my business partner. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Maybe I failed. I don't know. So he looked it up on the DRE website.
Hmm.
Sure enough, my license number is right there. Like they had already given me a license and stuff. They just didn't tell me that I passed. So it
Wow,
was
that's weird.
yeah, it
That's
was a weird
scary.
experience.
That's hecka
Anxiety
scary.
ridden. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet they don't want people, they probably have learned this, that they don't want people crying in there when they
Yes.
don't pass. They're like, send them outside. This is like our protocol because we don't want to deal with the emotions because they've been, studying for a while. They're stressed out and they're
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. I've never heard of that. So,
Yeah,
well,
it was really pretty dumb. But I have an employee, she's working through the test
mhm,
and she hasn't had a lot of success. So we're putting her through like a crash course on everything. And her confidence has slowly gone down. And so we sat down and had a conversation with her and just kind of explained, skill sets come in very, very different ways.
mhm,
She's an influencer on Instagram. She's got like 200,000 followers. She's smart. She's beautiful. She's quick on her feet.
yeah,
She's going to be an amazing agent. She really, really is. She's got a spark in her and she's very competitive. She's going to do great. But, sometimes test taking, totally different skill,
mhm.
totally different skill. And it's just one of those things you have to get through in order to become the agent you want to become.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting, like when I was the 5 years that I was helping build our business, um, my business partner and I, granted, I'm a pretty outgoing person. I've always been really social, but there's a part of me that's a little bit introverted and I kind of like to just chill and relax. And so my business partner was that type of guy that's like always on, right? Like gets along with everybody. And he was the kind of the face of the company. So I was always really good at like, I wrote our franchising manual, right?
Mhm.
Like 180 pages because I can sit and I can just work and
Yep.
grind stuff out. And it's just people have to realize that for these sort of things, right? I mean, eventually if you stick at it, you'll get it, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
that difficult of an exam in the way that, it's the same information, right? It's not going to
Right.
trick you. You just have to learn the rules, learn the regulations and laws and whatever.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, it's a different language. It's just
mhm,
like learning a different language. Once you know the language, you can answer almost anything. But it's a different language that you have to learn.
mhm.
A lot of it is we were going through some stuff and it's like once you learn these definitions, you can apply it to pretty much all of real estate, but you got to know it. You just have to know it.
Yeah, I'm working through a program right now, a business that I'm designing for adult education, and we're going to start with loan officers and then move to
Okay.
realtors.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, and you can tell me what your view on this is, but when we're going through K through 12, and then if you go through college or through some other program, you're pretty much taught how to learn, right? By the different program or the different study habits that they try to help you create, by the different programs that they have in place. And then you leave that and you haven't been in school for a while and you forget how to learn. And it
Yeah.
is a real skill to remember, like, how to learn, how do I put time aside, how do I
Yeah.
get everything in place. And that's kind of what we're trying to combat, right? This, instead of being in a position where you are it's called call and recall, right, where you just read
Yeah.
it and then try to memorize it. We're trying to overcome that and create a system that deals with people's learning habits and then reteaching them how to learn and how to retain. So I feel for her, right? Because
Yeah.
and then I
Yeah.
took my LO license, and there's
Hmm.
very little overlap as it pertains to the real estate and
Oh,
LO
I
side.
wouldn't know that. I would not want to take that test.
Yeah, it
I don't
was
think so.
the education part's far less than real estate, but
Uh-huh.
the overall information is pretty tricky
Yeah.
because the way the laws work, and the way that they've changed over time, and certain stuff deals with the law and other
Hmm.
stuff deals with rules, and they're not in the same area. And so
Interesting.
that's the sort of stuff that we're trying to like figure out, right? And make better.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's such an interesting thing that you brought that up. So, okay,
Yeah.
so you took the test, you had a
Yep.
freak out, but you passed it.
Passed
What were
it. Got
those
my license.
first what was that first year like for you being in real estate?
So this is gonna sound crazy, but it was a lot of faking until I made it. Like especially my first few deals. You don't really know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know the general idea. You took the test. Ideally you're working with somebody that you trust or have a mentor or you're on a team. Have somebody introducing you to like how to do these things. But when you hit that first client and they're looking at you like, hey, we're putting some trust in you, like you don't want to be the person who has no deals,
Right.
who's never worked with anybody, who doesn't have any experience. Like you don't want to be that person. And so I thought, I'm just gonna look at everything I can look at, study everything I can study. I'm gonna follow people. I'm gonna show homes. I'm gonna do everything I can do, even though I'm not getting paid for it, so that when I can look at this new client, I can justifiably say, I know I can help you.
Mm-hmm.
But still, even then, the biggest thing I think that got me through the first couple deals was showing a confidence I really did not feel. It
Mm-hmm.
was walking into a room saying, I've got you covered. And then leaving, having a list of questions that I needed to ask,
Right.
the
Go
person.
back to your broker, your team
Yeah.
lead, and be like, yo, what is this?
What is this? What is this? What
Yeah.
is this? They know more than me. I don't know. And that's how you learn though, right? Like that's how
Mm-hmm.
you learn. And then things got smoother and smoother the more problems you run into, right? So lots of times with new agents that I'm interviewing, hiring, bringing on, I tell them like, this is a problem solving business. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the problem you solve is in direct correlation to how much money you're making. Like you solve problems, we solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
If you give up at the first sign of a problem, this is probably not the business for you. When you see a problem, you should tackle it like, yes, this is how I'm going to make more money. This is how I'm going to prove my worth. Like I'm going to solve this for you. I'm going to solve it good. So it's so that's kind of how I approached my first year. Like, I'm just going to take everything in. I'm going to make as many mistakes as possible so that I can correct them so that I know later. And it worked pretty well for me. Worked pretty well.
It can be scary, right? Like even myself, like I had a lot of experience in sales. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of my primary business. I had worked in nonprofits for a really time. So I was very comfortable with going out in the community and getting to meet people that I've never known before, right? But then a lot of people don't realize that when you study for the exam, you don't actually learn how to be a realtor.
Yes.
You're just learning the rules that go into, making sure that you're not breaking any laws.
Right.
And so you don't know how to read a contract, you don't know how to write a contract, and if you haven't had experience in sales or whatever it may be, you have to learn all of that stuff on the fly, right? So I don't know, about you guys, but essentially kind of some of the first things that I was, assigned to do was to sit down and read through an entire contract, write notes on what I thought it was saying, because the way that contracts are written is it's written as this is what it is unless you don't want it to be that, right?
Yeah.
And that was a really weird way to like I thought phrase stuff. And I was like,
Yes.
okay, so I know that I've talked to a couple people who are at different brokerages, and sometimes the education like in getting people ramped up is very, very good, and other
Mhm.
times it's not good at all,
Right.
and they
Right.
have it that much more difficult of a time. And that's why I think it's important to make sure that you're picking a brokerage that aligns with how you like to learn. I think is a big part of it, right? If you're the type of person that you're just going to go learn it on your own anyway, then you can pretty much work anywhere. But if you need that guidance, you like to work in that team atmosphere,
Mhm.
it's super important, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So my experience, at this point, I went straight from being an employee of a team to being on a team to running a team.
Mm-hmm.
So I've actually never stepped out and said, you know what? I don't, I don't have any like accountability. I'm just going to work from home and do my thing and be that solo agent.
Right.
I never have. I don't have that experience. It's just not where I'm an expert. I just not what my career path has looked like.
Right.
So I've always been in a position. The team that I originally joined, very big on training. They had a lot of people there. The brokerage supported the team in that training, and the brokerage provided different training.
Right.
But really, they were two different things. You had the team training that you did with the team lead and all of what encompassed that. And then you also had what the broker provided as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both great. They both were really, really responsive to requests, to answer phone calls, to provide mentors. All of that stuff was really hands-on. In fact, some of it, I think, even on the team was very mandatory, so there were times that the first 2 months that I was working as an agent, I had this guy who was awesome. He became a very good friend of mine, never bought a house though. But I think I must've shown him upwards of 100 homes in that first
Oh,
2 months. It was a lot. It
yeah.
was a lot. And then he had a family emergency and he ended up leaving the country, but
Oh
he still
man.
sometimes texts me.
Mm-hmm.
So It was crazy though. I showed him like probably 8 to 12 homes multiple times a week. Like it was a lot. It's also how I cut my teeth on all of that stuff though. But I wanted to write an offer so bad, right? Like you're just starting out, you want to make money, you want to learn these things. But I had this guy that just wanted to go see homes. He never wanted to write an offer, never wanted to do anything. So I would actually go back to the team and I would say, this is the homes we looked at. I'm going to do a practice contract. Can I send it to somebody to review? So I would send it to one of the listing agents on the team and they would go through it. They would mark, hey, this is where you did right. Or they would catch me in something like, ooh, do you really want to do that? Because that might lead to a problem. So it was a good exercise for me. And then when I actually did do it, it felt like I'd been doing it for months.
I think that's a great way to approach it. I actually never really thought about doing that. When we went through it and we kind of did it, I was like, okay, yeah, I understand like what this is. And I know that, at our brokerage, it's required that, especially if you're brand new, that your contracts are reviewed by the broker. If you're not in real estate or you don't fully understand that, the way that real estate works is that the deals that a realtor does are technically owned by the brokerage. They're not the brokerage owns them. So the person that's liable for them ultimately is the broker who owns that business. And the realtors are the facilitator of the deals. So it's in good practice for your broker to be involved because they're ultimately the ones that are going to have to deal with any problems that come in. Right. So that whole kind of process of, you doing that, I was like, man, I wish I kind of would have done that because it would have been, first off, I kind of like writing contracts. I don't know why. I just think they're interesting. But I think that would have been a really cool way to approach it and to get into it. And I've heard Remax has a very good education program. That's part of the reason they've been so successful year after year is because they're very strong in educating their realtors, which I think is really important. Well, I know is really important because I'm sure you've had your fair share of people who you've worked with who you've thought, you're not the best realtor I've ever worked with, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you can catch that pretty quickly when you're doing real estate, that this is probably going to be a little more difficult of a transaction because of that, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had training in place and then you took it upon yourself to go that extra mile and make sure that you're doing it right and have people review it. And that's amazing. So you're talking about your first deal. It's funny. That's a lot of homes to sell. And in another podcast, we talk about the value of a realtor, right? Understanding that part of getting better at being a salesperson is finding a way to mitigate, wasting your time. Yep. Now, I'm not saying you wasted your time, but that's a lot of houses.
So the first year when you have nothing else going on, not a waste of time. Now, never, not in my life would I do it. I would definitely give it to one of my new agents who need to cut their teeth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The ones who have only shown 2 homes in their entire career, right? Those would be the ones I send it to. Because so at one point I did an exercise where I calculated how much money I make an hour, like what would be an hourly wage. And time is money. It really, really is. And would I really want to spend all of that time on something that's not going to make me any money, not in the long run. So you get a little bit more picky about those things as you go, for sure.
Yeah. And I think I've said this before, that I think when you're starting out, in those first 2 to 3 years, if you're out there and you're showing all those homes, there's value in that because most people are not super in tune with their community. They, kind of live where they know where they live. They maybe know like wherever they hung out, but especially in Sacramento, there's a ton of micro communities out here and that makes a huge difference. So being able to go out and show all these houses, even if your deal falls apart or whatever it is, you're learning the businesses that are around there. You're learning the small communities that are around there, where are the parks at, where are the restaurants at, right? All this stuff that ultimately in buyers' minds is secondary to finding the right home, but that's what makes it feel real, right? Is that they're going to find these places. And I think that's a valuable resource to kind of remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and every single time I mean, any length of time you spend with a client, you're going to have conversations where there's objections. There's going to
Hmm.
be things that they bring up that you don't know the answers to. There's going to be interesting conversations. And those are the conversations where you learn, so that the next time it comes up, you have a ready answer. You've already researched it. You've already had these conversations. You've already overcome this objection with somebody else. So all of those conversations, all that time is worth it. It has value. But if you already feel comfortable and your goal is to make money and you already know most of these things,
Hmm.
sure, maybe give it to somebody else to learn.
Yeah, sometimes, especially if you've been in the industry for a while, first off, because you're a team lead, there's a direct benefit of feeding your own team, right? You got
Absolutely.
to keep morale up, you got to keep them fed, you got to, there's a responsibility there. That's really important. I don't know if I'm necessarily a team lead, but I have realtors that work under me that I coach because I'm on the LO side and I
Mhm.
have experience in real estate. But it's the same idea, right? Like it's important that they're being nurtured, and this can be a really sad industry to be in. It could be a very lonely industry to be in.
Yes.
A lot of times you're spending most of your days in front of your computer by yourself or driving around in your car by yourself. And
Yeah.
so it's nice to know that there's, cheerleaders there for you essentially. And it sounds like that's what you have, because
Yeah.
you were in that team format. You didn't come in as a solar broker.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I would be so sad if I was suddenly alone. I don't know quite what I would do with myself. I would have to completely revamp my mindset on motivation
Hmm.
and accountability. I think I would have to completely change it, because we're extremely accountable as a team. Part of, being self-employed and being an owner of your own business is making sure that you do the work. If
Hmm.
you're not in the habit of doing the work, chances are you're not going to get much out of it. So we try to instill that in all of our agents and ourselves. You show up, you do the work, even when you don't want to, and you have somebody else that helps you be accountable. But we try to be pretty transparent about that stuff.
Yeah, it's nice. It really depends on the individual,
Yeah.
obviously, because I've always been the type of person that, like, no matter who's in the room, I'm competing to be the best. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily matter to me. Like, I'll sit in a room for 12 hours and work by myself and then whatever, right? But I also love being on a team, right? I've been involved with a lot of clubs. I do a lot of I'm in Rotarian, I'm in Freemasons. And so I very much love, being around people and collaborating and things like that. And I think this always falls back to making sure that you're researching, who you're going to be with. Did you decide that you were going to be with Remax before you? Oh, you did, because you were licensed. Or sorry, you were working there already. Um, I
Yes.
noticed that some people will decide where they're going to be before they even get licensed. And I always think that's really interesting because, unlike you or myself, they don't have any experience there. They're just like,
Yeah.
well, this is the closest brokerage to me, or this is the name I've heard the most, or the signs I've seen
Mhm.
the most. And I don't think that's necessarily a great way to pick a brokerage.
Sure.
You should shop them, I think.
Yes. We have an agent we brought on about 3 months ago, a new agent,
Hmm.
brand new. I think he got his license, probably spring, I think is when it happened. And he was with he shopped around, did tours, did all of this stuff, and went with a brokerage that's not our brokerage,
Hmm.
and struggled quite a bit.
Sure.
Just the setup didn't work for him, and he didn't realize that when he first went in. You don't necessarily know. I mean, you might know how you learn and what's best for you, but sometimes you get in there, you're like, this is not what I need.
Right.
So then he started shopping around. It eventually led him to us. And it's a lot more hands-on. He needs somebody right in front of him. He
Yeah.
needs somebody having rapport with and chatting with and having conversations. He wants to be able to come in and say, hey, I had this conversation. I don't know what to do with it, and have somebody there with him to talk him through it. It works really well for him. Some people, we had an agent just over a year ago, and it didn't work. It didn't really click because she was more like, I just want to be left alone. I
Hmm.
just want to be left alone. I want to be able to do my own thing. She had experience in real estate and had built her business, but her business had kind of plateaued and
Hmm.
fallen, and she just kind of wanted some help back up.
Yeah.
But our jive and her jive, our cultures just really didn't match. And so we eventually sat down and said, hey, this not really working because what
Mhm.
you want and what we want aren't really aligned.
Yeah.
However, let's get you set up in a way that works for you, in a position, in a place that works for you. And she's doing just fine on her own, doing her own thing.
Yeah. Well, I think an important distinction, right, for people that are out there that are listening to this is that there's I don't want to say a lot, but there's quite a people that brokerage hop, right? They go from broker to
Mhm.
broker because they think, oh, I'm
Yes.
not finding the right team. And it's
Yes.
possible you just picked the wrong career path.
Yes. Yes.
So be honest with yourself, be,
Yeah.
transparent, understand that like I totally understand, wanting to find the right type of group, but ultimately no matter what group you're in, this is a self-motivated business,
Yeah.
right? You can be in a team or not be in a team. They're not going to do your job for you, right? There's
Right.
a lot of work that goes into
Yep.
going out and finding your own business. And then once you kind of have that, they're there to help you, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So,
What you put in is what you get out. We have that very honest conversation with almost everybody we talk to that comes through and wants to join the team. We'll know if you're not putting in enough. It'll be
mhm,
pretty evident, and some people don't want to do a ton. It's just a hobby thing. They just want to work with friends and family, and that's
mhm,
perfectly fine if that's in your business scenario.
right.
That's not exactly our business plan,
Mhm.
but ultimately, if your goal is, X amount of deals, 20 plus, and you're doing 5 or 6 deals, something's not right here.
Right.
What's happening? Where's the give? And those are hard conversations to have. They really are, but they're necessary.
Yeah. What's the average deal out in the Central Valley right now, around Modesto?
Like the average amount that agents do. I know in our brokerage, and ours is a little bit higher, I think, than average in California. I think the average amount of deals is about 15 per agent
Okay.
at our brokerage. I
Mhm.
think in California, last time I checked, it was like 6 or 7
Yeah,
or
it's
something like
typically right
that.
around there. What's the price point you
Yeah.
guys are? What's the median price point out there?
Yeah, good question. It depends on which end of the valley you're in. I would say probably the Modesto is right around that 450 mark.
Mhm.
The last couple years has kind of thrown a wrench in what the median price looks like,
Sure.
and it is shifting, right? But I would say probably about 550 in the Manteca area. Don't quote me on that. That's not any research I did
Yeah.
as of today, but within
Well,
the
we
last
do
six
a
months.
ton of LO work out in Manteca and Lathrop, and part of what's driving the median out there is all the new development.
Yes,
Yeah,
Manteca is huge with
yeah,
new homes.
it's
Yes.
crazy. So, but when I was working nonprofit, was back in the valley for a small amount of time. I worked in Manteca at a nonprofit, and I had the opportunity to mingle with the police chief and the fire chief and the
Mhm.
mayor and all of these people. And I would go to the city events where they talk about city growth and things like that, and they talk about Manteca is a really interesting place.
Mhm.
If as a realtor, we try to look at what's our community look like and what's going to be the next up and coming like area, and to try to,
Right.
especially for investors. And
Mhm.
so there's this thing called superhighways, and there's about, I think, three of them in California. And essentially, they're interchanges to where you can get through to any part of the state. And
Mhm.
Manteca is one of them. And
Yeah.
so, because of that, a lot of industry has come out there. And
Right.
in turn, not a lot of new development has come out there, and it's raising the price. And it's crazy because Manteca was not always like a super great place to be.
No.
There wasn't a lot to
Oh,
do. And so
yeah.
you were kind of like, when I looked back at it, I was like, how much are houses there? How much are people paying
Yeah.
for these new developments? Because we were
Yeah.
doing about 20 loans a month out there.
Mhm.
And we were doing pre-approvals for upward to 100.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I was blown away.
Yeah,
Um,
there's mass amounts of new developments there. It's
mhm,
probably one of the top places in the valley, I would imagine, for new builds. It's
mhm,
odd because you come just over the bridge to Modesto and it dwindles
mhm.
down to very, very few new builds.
Yeah.
So there is something about Manteca. Well, I imagine it was a bit of a commuter village,
Mhm.
there it was more of a pass-through town for a really
Right.
long time.
Exactly.
But as things I think spread from the Bay, as people spread from the Bay, as people make their long-term residences, I really do think it's a place that's growing and thriving and changing.
Hmm.
Even from the time that I started to the time that I started to shift my business down a little bit, totally different town. I mean, the community was growing and their community events were growing. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, no, it is a fun place to be at. It's you still get that
Mhm.
small community feel, which is really
Yes.
nice. But you're right, it is because of that freeway and because of all the new
Mhm.
development. It is kind of like that. And I don't remember the exact number, but they were saying like a really high percentage of their money is Bay Area money, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so what you saw was this migration from the Bay Area for people who couldn't afford to live there anymore or wanted a bigger space and couldn't afford to upgrade there. You know, they
Mhm.
moved through different parts of the Bay Area. Then eventually they're moving in. It's anywhere that you can commute essentially within an hour is pretty
Mhm.
advantageous. And it's funny dealing with the loans. There's rules on technically how far your home is supposed to
Yeah.
be from. And then we have to tell them, they're like, oh, well, what state are you in? We're like, oh, we're in California. It's totally normal to drive an hour to an hour and a half for work here. Right.
Right. I had
So,
I had one loan. It's the first loan that I saw it on.
mhm,
For some clients that were moving from San Jose to Stockton, I think is
okay.
where they bought. And she calls me and says, "Hey, there's a condition that they say we have to write an explanation for
Mhm,
why we're choosing to live here." And she's like, "What does that mean?"
mhm,
And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never actually heard a client, and maybe they have and they just didn't tell me, but
mhm.
nobody's ever called and said, 'Hey, why?' I have to explain why I want to live here." She's like, "It's because we can't afford anything over there." She's like, "Do I just put that?" Like, but it was a condition that they had to clear for her because
Mhm.
it was such a distance between their jobs and where they're living.
Yeah, we get a lot of that, especially in that Manteca area because people are commuting, right? And I think I want to say it's like 50, not 50 miles, maybe 30 miles or something like that. It's been a little while since I've had that condition, but yeah, Manteca is a really interesting place. And then what's on the other side? Patterson.
Yeah,
That
Patterson's
they're
out there.
looking, yeah,
Tracy's up a little bit, and then Patterson's just to the
where
side.
they're
Mhm.
looking to build that freeway that goes directly from Patterson to San Jose, right? Which
Yeah.
San Jose right now is the highest median home place in our state, right?
Mm,
Which
wow.
probably means most of the country, if not all the country, right?
Yes.
So it's really interesting, and I've been looking very heavily at the valley as for investment properties because
Mhm.
you know Sacramento last year, the year before was the number one real estate market in the world, and that was because San Jose was too expensive. The Bay was too expensive. They still needed a
Right.
place to commute, and they still wanted, I guess, Sacramento's not like super city, but they
Uh-huh.
wanted a place to commute from. And Sacramento made sense, right? Housing was still pretty affordable here at the time. Our housing median was like 450.
Mm,
So
mhm.
now it's about 100 to 150
Yeah,
thousand dollars higher, but
I bet.
that money is continuing to filter down and down, and it's going to go into the valley, and housing prices are going to continue to jump there. I think it's
Mhm.
going to be a really great place to be a realtor and to build your
Yeah.
base and to buy investment properties now for
Mhm.
10, 15 years from now. They're going to have a lot of value.
Yeah, for sure. I tried, when COVID hit and we had a lot of people coming from the Bay that were working from home and they felt they had the freedom to live a little bit farther
Hmm.
away from the Bay and in a cheaper area. I tried really hard to steer people towards Patterson because it really, when you talk about the freeways, the traffic, and the distance, it's really not too far off. And it's still a fairly small town. Home prices are fairly reasonable
Hmm.
there. Very different from Tracy. I mean, home prices, it's so much more affordable than Tracy,
Hmm.
and really comparable in distance. But I don't know, people. Only one person went for it.
Yeah, well, Patterson's an interesting place. I like Patterson still because they're still building and have available lots of land that can be kind of ranch style, you know, an acre to 3 acre land lots. And that's so difficult to find now. I have a couple people they're looking for the ranchettas or, you know, at least one minimum 1 acre that has some land on it. And they're so difficult to find that are that already have like, you know, plumbing and electric and stuff like that that aren't
Right.
way out in the hills somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that can be really difficult.
Yes, it is for
Hmm.
sure. This well, and you have to go a little bit farther out. The farther out you go, the more acreage, and it just the price starts to expand and expand and expand.
Hmm.
And we have a vacant lot right now. I think that's the one that you passed that you had some clients that
Oh
were looking
yeah,
at.
yeah. They were gonna go check it out. I actually never heard back from them about it. I think they're kind of waiting until. I think everybody right now thinks there's gonna be a huge shift in the market, right? So you
Yes.
get a lot of
Yes.
people that are like, "Well, we're gonna wait because we think this," and I go, "That's
Right.
fine. I mean, rates are probably gonna go up to 9%, but you continue to
Yeah.
wait. Let's do that."
Yeah. It's hard. It's just such a changing market, and nobody has a crystal ball. I try really hard to say. So I have a friend that was 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago. I was pretty new in the business,
Hmm.
and she said, "My dad told me there's gonna be a crash, so I'm gonna wait." And I
Okay.
said, "I don't think that's a good idea." Let me explain why. Let me share my concerns with you about that. And I did. And she said, "No, like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait." And then the next year, she was almost priced out. And then the following year, she was way priced out.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's like, oh, maybe it's possible. Oh, I got to, maybe. But, well, what if things dip a little bit more? What if So I think I've heard the narrative quite a bit. I just got a text message this morning. I'm going to wait till next fall. Prices are going to drop farther. Well, how do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where
Yeah,
are you
let me
getting
let
your
me
information?
know. Okay, where's the
Right.
website? Yeah, I need to know this information too.
If you have an expert
Yeah.
somewhere, because that's not what I'm
Yeah, you got it
hearing.
in at the Federal Reserve or something? I mean, let me know what's going on.
It's just funny. It's funny to listen to. And I think I really do believe that we have a kind of a bloated mindset or a warped mindset on what a healthy market looks like because of the last few years. And I
Hmm.
think it's going to take a while to iron that out with buyers, with sellers, on what a healthy market looks like, what those
Hmm.
timelines look like, what those price points look like. But those are all really hard conversations to have as those transitions are happening.
Yeah, I'm in a really fortunate position that, I don't technically work on both sides because for real estate now, I just do coaching. I
Mhm.
feed business to my team. And then if I have a friend or family member that's like, hey, will you help me? Then I'll help them. I mostly do the loan side, but I have a unique perspective on both. And so because I've done so many loans, I can do most of the math in my head now. And
Mhm.
so when people say say stuff like that to me, I say, well, this is what it's going to trend to, right? So let's do the math real quick, right?
Yep.
So let's say this house falls by $50,000. That's great, but now the rates are up at even 1%. That
Yep.
$50,000 still means that you're paying $250 more a month, right?
Yep.
So what's the point of waiting? How does that benefit you? And we talk about stuff like that. And the big thing that I try to really instill in people is that very rarely is there the perfect market to buy in, right? If you would have bought, like, obviously, when rates went down under 3%, and before the prices started to really jump, you maybe had 6 months there. That would have been the ideal time to buy, right? But then
Mhm.
prices skyrocketed, and it's still a good time. Rates are still low, but there's never a great time, right? The best time to buy is when you're ready, and you have to think of it as a multiple transaction thing, right? Like, most people need to refinance their property at some point, whether it
True.
is to take out money, whether it's to get an equity line of credit, or
Right.
because you're bought right now and the rate's at 5 and you want it at 4, right? We're there for you, whether it's us, whether it's your realtor, they have connections. And I think that's the important thing to understand is like, this is an equity state, right? This is in Ohio, this is in
Right.
Iowa. Like, the state, so far as we don't fall into the ocean, or,
Right.
California does something really weird, we lose all our crops.
Right.
We're going to continue to build equity here because that's the sort of state we have, and it doesn't benefit you very rarely to wait
Right.
when you are ready to buy.
Yeah. I usually it's a timeline thing for me. Like, are you planning to sell within 2 to 3 years or less? I
Hmm.
mean, if that's where you're at, then we do need to think about the numbers. We do need to think about what's actively happening in the market right now. But the majority of the time, they're not planning to do that. They're planning 5 to 7 years out or more.
Hmm.
And you can't, that the market goes on this 11-year cycle most of the time. And it, you're never going to be able to predict that, not really. And if they say they can, then they're probably lying.
Hmm.
And ultimately buying a house isn't just a financial decision, it's an emotional decision.
Hmm.
And I think you're at 100% right. Like if you're buying a home for your family, for yourself, for a legacy, for security, those have nothing to do with finances, not really. And that should be a portion of what plays into your decision, not the whole decision, because you're never going to get it exactly right. You won't. You can try and you'll probably be wrong. But go off your gut, go off of more of that emotional push, because that's really honestly why you're getting the house
Right.
for a roof over your head.
Yeah, you need a place to live, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately, like people are very, I get it. It's a ton of money, right? I
Mhm.
totally understand. And it's really difficult to get on the housing ladder in California. So
Yeah.
I totally empathize with that. But ultimately, I think people kind of lose sight with like, this is where you're going to have Thanksgiving. This is where you're going to have Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, this is where you're going to have birthdays and anniversaries and have people come over. This is going to be your home. And, sure, you could do that in a one bedroom apartment, but it might be easier to do it in, a house,
Right.
something
Yep.
like that. So, all right. So well, how long did it take you to go from, being a realtor to building a team?
Um, I don't know. 3 years. I think it was 3 years. It was not actually planned that way.
Mm,
We had kind of an ideal shift
mm-hmm,
right around 3 years, and we decided, we want to do things just a little bit differently, and a little bit differently than everybody's doing things. And in order to do that, we need to go out on our own to do it. And I think that was probably, if that hadn't happened, if that ideal shift hadn't happened in
mm-hmm,
ourselves, we would not have started a team so quickly. Like I definitely wouldn't have. I probably would have waited a few more years at least.
mm-hmm,
And I think probably a lot of people would say, "Oh my gosh, you're crazy. Like why what do you think you have to offer as a team lead that somebody with a decade of experience, doesn't have," or whatever the case. But ultimately it's been successful, thank goodness. And we've gotten to play out some of our ideals, some of our business ideas, some the way that we want to do things, and seen success in other people because of that. And
mm,
I think that was a huge draw for us. Not so much, oh, I did the numbers the other day. This is unfortunate, but I think that is for the first 2 years of the business, which is to be expected to a certain degree, we would have made so much more money on our own doing just ourselves and doing
mm-hmm.
whatever than pouring it back into a team.
Right.
Right. But ultimately that's not really the only reason that we wanted to start a team. We wanted to be able to see in other people what we got for ourselves, and the huge leap from I know nothing to I'm starting a team and helping other people. And it's really is a crazy high. It's great. It's
Mm-hmm.
great to watch. It was a wonderful transition for us. But I do think if in a perfect world, I probably would have waited a little bit longer to do it.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot because we're in a growth pattern right now at our brokerage. We're expanding through the state. And so there's, especially with my broker, right? Because as a broker who's been in the industry for 25 years, you can make a lot of money. You've built everything, every infrastructure that you need to be successful, you can. And so
Mhm.
he talks about all the time, like, I'm going to lose a lot of money over the next 5 or 10 years. I could make way more money, but the
Right.
idea of helping other people, helping the industry, creating a growth pattern for people who, one, want to be, our big thing is career realtors, right?
Mhm.
We want people that's what they want. They want to be doing at least like you guys are doing 12, 15 deals a year, things like that. And so that can be really interesting because I'm sort of in that position as well where I initially chose because I like coaching and I like working with people that's the sort of capacity that I would take.
Mhm.
And that's why I do what I do, right? I run our media side, I do LOs, and then I coach, anybody that comes in below me. It can be kind of like envious a little bit because you're like, man, there's all these people doing like everything that they're doing. They're killing it, like they're making,
Yeah.
a lot of money. but then you just kind of remember like, this is what I like to do, right? This is what makes me
Yeah.
happy. And I think that's ultimately what's the most important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of my favorite things um watching people go from knowing nothing to successfully having a super hard conversation with a client and seeing them overcome some of these really difficult objections and getting the client to the end result that they wanted, that the client wanted. And it's just cool to watch. But like, whoa, 3 months ago, like you would have never stepped into that conversation. You would have ran for the hills because it was difficult, because it was
Mm,
hard. And watching people learn what, because really we're in a people business, right? I
yeah.
mean, it's a home business. We need to sell and buy homes, but ultimately, like we're in a people business.
Right.
And watching people grow and being able to interact successfully with others. Oh, somebody looks a little lost. But the door's locked from the outside. I can't help her right now. um, oh, it looks like she found help. Good. That's really cool. I mean, it's definitely one of our driving forces, and leaving something behind that we can step back from, making it a franchisable business ultimately,
Hmm.
right? Like we don't necessarily have to be there for it to run completely successfully in this business plan. And that's what we're really working towards.
Right. So I'm curious, what is the special sauce on your guys' team that you guys have that you think others don't have, or that maybe you guys are doing better? Because I know when you're in, large corporations like Remax, there's a lot of things that you have to do the way that they want it. There's some freedom and autonomy. I'm wondering, what are you guys doing? Someone's out there, they're in the Modesto area, they're looking for a team. What can they
Mhm.
expect?
Yeah, so with our particular team, our Remax executive, they don't tend to step on our toes or anything like that. They're not a big brother, I guess, in this scenario. We have specific things. They pride themselves on not getting sued.
Yeah,
So
that's
they're
always
very
nice.
particular. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, right? Like, who wants to get
Yeah.
sued? But we live in a litigious society, and real estate is a litigious career,
Mm,
right? So you just always want to be watchful of those things. So in that regard, they do have a lot of control, making sure that our contracts are clean, making sure that our phrases, our verbiage, all of those things, how we respond to things that might end in court. That's when we really call them and say, "All right, we need your help," and they step in.
right.
But they're some of the best support I think I've seen in the business when it comes to a broker. They're really wonderful people, um, and extremely intelligent when it comes to that stuff. When it comes to how we run our business, they don't interfere with that. Ultimately, I think there's two teams, like actual teams, more than two people in the
Hmm.
Modesto office, and there's I think two in the Manteca office. But I could be wrong about that. If they're small teams, I'm not
Hmm.
sure. But and ultimately, they have the autonomy to run their team the way they like to run their team, however that looks. And every single team in Remax looks different. They run their team differently. They compensate differently. They train differently. All of those things are different.
Hmm.
One thing that we probably do a little differently, I so our system, gosh, I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but our system runs more in a team like setting. So we have an inside sales agent. We're hoping to bring on two more, hopefully within the next few months,
Hmm.
that actually works through and attacks all our leads and attacks all of our, they set all these appointments, and these
Right.
appointments are doled out to other agents. It took us a while to get it up and running because it's a difficult job, and because I don't know why in the Valley, I just don't see a lot of it.
Hmm.
But once we got it up and running, highly successful. And then we put everybody in the right seats in the bus. We're not really a team that, gosh, I don't know how to say this without sounding really bitchy, but like
No,
we don't
don't worry about
applaud.
it. Just be honest. I think this is a really interesting thing, right? Because I'm going to have a lot of people on here that are from different brokerages. And
Yeah.
for me, being the way that I'm competitive, if you're
Uh-huh.
not willing to say that you're the best, then I already feel like I won. I already feel like, don't even call them, just call me, right? So feel free to be like, this is why we're the best. This is why I think
Yeah.
our team is doing the best. And I just had somebody on where I was like, I feel pretty confident like him and I would have pretty good battles. Like he's
Yeah.
super competitive, super competent, very driven, and motivated for the right reasons. So don't be embarrassed. It's all right.
So, so the way that we do things is slightly different, right? So we don't actually want people to come. So we don't want people to come in and say, here's my plan. I'm going to do it. I don't necessarily care what the culture is. I don't
Mm,
necessarily care what everybody else is doing. I know best. I'm here to take the leads and learn, and then I'm going to bolt. I'm going to do my thing.
right.
What we're looking for is really, a team player. And I know that's crazy in real estate because, like you said, it can be a lonely business.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's
you're
really not
also
how we
competing against each other in
You're
a kind of a
competing
way,
against each
right?
other.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're competing against each other. You're competing against yourself, your own
Hmm.
numbers. You're competing against like everybody, every other agent in the community. I mean, there is a lot of competition.
Right.
But in that, there's also a lot of growth that can happen without people pitted against each other, right?
Hmm.
And I think a lot of realtors fall into this, and this is where I'm a little different as a realtor. I think a lot of realtors fall into this idea that I have to take the other ones out
Mm,
in order to be successful. And I'm not a proponent of that. That's not something that I'm about at all, right?
right.
Like there's plenty of business and yeah, there is some competition. And yeah, that's why we want the best systems. And that's why I want to provide 5-star service, but I'm not going to kick somebody else in order to get a deal,
Hmm.
right? If somebody, like I'm going to lift them up and my expertise is going to prove itself. I don't
Right.
have to do anything to change that, and that is something I especially see in deals. You had said something earlier that I want to comment on. That's sometimes the hardest part of a deal. I don't know if you phrased it this way, is the other agent on the other side.
Right.
That is so very true in this business. Many times I don't have problems with clients, but I have had many problems with the other agents.
Hmm.
Lots of times because they just get mad. They start yelling. And I can't even believe people would think it's professional or anything.
Right.
They start yelling and bullying and pushing. You do this, do this, do this. And I never rise to that bait.
Yeah.
That's just silly. What an emotional waste of time. But like they hate it. They hate it. I think realtors have I don't want to say realtors, but I think people in sales
Yeah.
specifically, they do have a drive. They do have that motivation, that competitiveness. And I think sometimes it pushes them to want to control the other person,
Hmm.
right? And I've run into enough. It's just not who I am as a person. It's not how I roll. It's not what I do. I'm competitive in my own right. Obviously, I'm a successful realtor. Um, but my competition looks a little different, I think, than the average person. That's what I want. I want people on my team who want to grow, who want to be
Right.
better than they were yesterday, who want to be the best, but that has nothing to do with anybody else,
Hmm.
right? Like that has nothing to do with what that other person is doing down the street, or this other person who said, I have a better way of doing it, blah 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 blah, your team sucks, your business sucks, your whatever.
Sure.
Like it has nothing to do with that
Yeah.
person, right? Like it has everything to do with wanting to be the very best realtor you can be, the 5-star service realtor you can be, beating your numbers from the previous day, from the previous year. Like that's our culture. That's what we do.
Hmm.
It's a very positive vibe culture. We're very chill people. Like it's not like I'm not going to be the person saying get him, get him, get him. Like that's
Right.
not going to be me. It's going to be like, how can we do better? How can
Hmm.
we do better? And how can we prove that to our clients? So I don't know. I'm probably like the soft
Yeah,
center.
it sounds like a very, very warm and nurturing and lovely place to be.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess, but like if an agent comes out, like I'm successful in real estate,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not going to roll over, right?
Right.
I'm not going to be bullied and by anybody. But again, you can do that with respect for another
Yeah.
person, right? And I think it's easy to cut corners in real estate. I don't know why. Like I think the business has a stereotype for cutting corners, for
Mm,
being kind of schmarmy, businessy,
yeah.
salesman-y. I hate that. I hate that stereotype. And I know it's out there because people come to me with it. I had a client just the other day, super close with me. We're friends. It's wonderful. We were about to close on their house. And they said, well, they had phrased it like we're not sure about this transaction. We're not sure about this house. So we were having a conversation about that.
Hmm.
And they said, well, we know that your team and your business is pushing us to get this home because you have skin in the game. You want to get
Right.
paid. And I was like, it came out of nowhere. I was really surprised because it's not really how I run my business.
Right.
But I think it was an idea in their head, not so much an idea about what I was doing. So I told them, like, you don't want to buy the house. Let's not buy the house. Let's sign the cancellation. I'm okay with it.
Hmm.
Like, I don't necessarily need your business. And honestly, they were kind of difficult clients, lovely people, difficult clients.
Hmm.
And it had taken us a really long time, over a year, to get to this point. I could have made a lot of money from other people in a year.
Yeah.
That's not why I continued to work with them. So sometimes I think there's this running idea in people's heads that, we have to cut corners, or we have to, be a shark, or we have to lie or cheat or
Hmm.
bully in order to be successful in this business.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not in it. I'm not in it for that. Um, but that being said, I have had my fair share of yelling fights with realtors.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're coming from it in a good place. And I think overarching, this is what I see from successful realtors or teams is that same sort of a mentality, right? Well, there's a couple things that you said that really resonated. The first one was kind of the competition portion. I only say that I'm competitive in the way that I want to execute professionally and at a very high standard, right?
Yeah.
I don't care about what anyone else is doing unless they're doing something that I think is really unique or cool that I want to implement in my business, right? But once we are in contract, we're all a team now. And that's the way that I look at it, right? I'm not competing against the other realtor. I'm not competing against their clients now. It's still their job to do what's best for them. It's still our job to do what's best for our clients. But ultimately, if everybody here is going to get what they want, we all have to work at a team. We have to make sure things are getting done on time, correctly, and that we're being reasonable, right? I mean, I think sometimes it does feel like someone's attacking you on the other side, and that's not the case, right? And I think that's where communication really comes into play, and understanding that's maybe the way that you text or email or sound
Yes.
on a voicemail can come off of combative, and it's not
Yes.
necessarily. You just have to be delicate. I always try to approach it very delicate, always at the start, because I understand that people can kind of lose their nerve.
Oh yeah.
And
Goes quick.
keep in mind that we talk about this at our brokerage. Our brokerage is built on the foundation of career realtors working from an ethics space, right?
Mhm.
You have to be ethical. If you're the type of person that your only goal is to come in and make as much money as you can, this isn't the right brokerage for you.
Right.
We work slightly lower volume because we work on repeat business, because we build very strong bonds with our clients. It sounds
Mhm.
like this is very similar to what you guys are doing. And so, um, that sort of, understanding that from the space that you're coming with, and understanding, how you're going to move forward is really critical.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are doing that really well. I think that as a consumer, you need to understand that it's really important that the realtor that you're working with, the team that you're working with, the brokerage that you're working with, that they're competent, because someone like Valerie, who's going to speak from a place of knowledge and calm, can only do that because she's knowledgeable and she's professional. And typically, people that are coming from the other direction, they're
Yeah.
doing that because they're typically compensating for some lack of knowledge or emotional, capability.
Oh, 100%. You
Hmm.
got it in one.
Yeah.
I have one. I know we're running short on
Yeah.
time,
We're
but
almost done here.
I have one situation that I think is totally crazy and
Hmm.
exemplifies everything you just said. We recently across a problem with another agent, extremely unprofessional, just getting everything wrong contractually, getting everything wrong, not really understanding what was happening. She'd been in the business a very long time, though, very, very long time.
Hmm.
We were confused on what was happening. Like, we were confused, concerned that, this deal was going to end up canceling because of just a lack of know-how from the
Right.
other side. And we said, maybe we should reach out to her broker and just talk through like what's really happening on the other side and make sure that somebody's got it covered, even if this agent isn't capable of handling it. So we went to go reach out to her broker. Her broker is her husband. And they're
Oh,
just
yeah.
they're just a couple duo.
Hmm.
That's the accountability.
Yeah.
And how do you combat that?
Yeah.
Right. If you have somebody who's not being ethical, if you have somebody who doesn't know how to do the job, you have somebody who's being combative, who isn't working really for their clients, and you go to reach out to try to help the situation, and it's actually their spouse, that's their
Hmm.
broker, really, where do you go from
Yeah,
there?
that's a tough spot to be in.
It's a tough spot, and who you work with really does matter. It
Hmm.
really matters, and those are good questions to ask. And I would always recommend for a consumer or for an agent who's looking to join a team or a broker or whatever, ask a lot of hard questions and see how they answer.
Hmm.
Like make sure they have answers. Like ask, if I get sued, what happens?
Right.
If I get in deep water, like what goes on? What's going to happen? What are you going to do? Because that's what they're there for. They're to help you through those things, to answer and help answer those questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a deal when I was relatively new where the other realtor was a seasoned realtor and was sending stuff over and it was wrong. And because
Mhm.
I was new, I thought I was wrong. But I was like,
Yeah.
I know this is not right, but also like this person's been a realtor for 10 years, so maybe there's something I don't know. And then
Right. You question yourself.
I
Yeah.
would take it to my broker and I'd be like, "Hey, like I don't think this is right. Like is this correct?" And he'd be like, "No, that's not right." And I'd be like, That's what I thought." It's the whole time like second guessing myself because it was
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a weird thing. So we are getting towards the end of the podcast. I do want to kind of end on one thing. What's the future look like for your guys' team? What's the future look like for you?
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't even think I actually said our team, but we're the core team at Remax Executive. We're the core team. And as far as us, we're looking to grow. I mean, that's really, we're what you would call a Navy SEAL team. So we're not a huge team. We're not looking for 20 agents. We're not a mini brokerage in a brokerage. That's not our goal. But we're looking for a small amount of really, really hard workers. And that's really the goal for the next 5 years, is to just hone in on building businesses to the point where they're pulling in mass amounts of money, helping mass amounts of families get into homes, and really having fun doing it and having a really good time. That's ultimately what our culture is. So that's the plan. That's the plan.
that's the plan. What about for you?
Oh my gosh. I just bought a house and I'm remodeling it. It's like a
Oh,
fixer. I bought a
congrats.
fixer to sell in a couple years. That's
Uh-huh.
what I did. Which is the silliest, craziest thing. I don't know why I did it, because it's turning into more work than I thought.
Mhm.
But for me in my personal life, that's what I'm spending my time on, is remodeling and selling a house.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on. Again, if you are someone that's looking to buy or sell and you're in the Central Valley area, or you're a realtor looking to join an amazing team, check out Remax Executive Core out of Modesto, right?
Correct.
Out of
Correct.
Modesto, or reach out to Valerie. I'm sure. Do you want to give, I don't know if you have your social medias and things like that you want to put out for people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just under my name. You can find me under my name and pretty much everywhere. My phone number is plastered everywhere. Just type in Valerie
There
Collins,
you
you'll
go.
find me.
Valerie Collins in the Central Valley. Thank you guys for being on. This is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. You guys have a great day, and thanks again.